Good afternoon to everyone. Today, with my colleague Jana, we would like to present Charles Peirce, not as much as a semiotician, but rather as an evolutionary theorist. Because Peirce's science doctrine has been already widely applied to the field of biosemiotics, but his evolutionary essays also deserve major attention. So what we plan to do is to compare Lamarck's and Peirce's views on evolution, and based on our conclusions on proper mentions of Lamarck by Peirce. And as you know, Peirce widely commented on evolution in many of his writings, mostly published in between 1891 in 1893. Those papers are famous as Monist papers, but were also published posthumously with this famous book entitled Chance, Love, and Logic, and edited by Maurice Cohen. So this will be a sort of short excursion to the history of ideas on evolution. But we would also like to connect our findings with the contemporary research in biology, concretely to the current findings in epigenetics. And I think that Jana is the best candidate for this task because you probably read her recently published book on epigenetics. So if not, I highly recommend reading that book. We will show you in the last slide this publication. So to introduce the evolutionary theory by Peirce, it has to be said that his evolutionary theory meets his philosophical and mathematical understanding of the universe in a vast sense of relations between mind and matter, potentiality and actuality, or individuality and continuity. Chance, law, and habit are three basic components of Peirce's doctrine, and they are defined by mutual reciprocity. When applied to evolution or evolutionary theory, they acquire a new form and a new nomenclature, becoming accordingly tikasm, anankasm, and agapasm. Tikasm was already mentioned a couple times yesterday, for example, by Tori. So we will not concentrate that much on this first type of evolution, but we will concentrate rather on the second and third types of evolution, because this is how Peirce calls the three components of his doctrine when applied to evolution, and he uses the terms of tikastic, anankastic, and agapastic evolution. So while he attributes the evolution by chance to Darwin, he attributes the evolution by law to Lamarck. And the third type of evolution, the evolution by habit, is Peirce's own evolutionary theory. Thus, Lamarckian is the evolution as understood by the philosophy of necessitarianism. You can see that Peirce's reading of Lamarck stands in contradiction to the traditional reading of Lamarckian evolution as vitalist or goal-oriented. Mechanical necessity is the term more effectively explaining what Peirce expresses by the principle of anankasm. Law here is to be comprehended in terms of physical laws, so that any step in evolution would be explained by a physical, chemical, or environmental necessity. The necessity is in its part driven by causal process. Causality, as contrary to randomness from the first type of evolution, develops into the central mechanism behind the second type of evolution. Causality is an anankastic evolution, is development by the mere force of circumstances or of logic. This is the quote from the essay Evolutionary Love. So causality is dependent exclusively on the pressure of external circumstances or cataclysm in evolution. Another quote from the same essay. Therefore, Lamarck's evolution is a sort of reduced to such an understanding of causality in the evolution of species without any scope to attain. But even more radically, we could say that anancasm as causality is in a direct contradiction with the teleological understanding of causality, or let's say a teleological understanding of evolution. And according to Lamarck himself, as Jana will confirm, evolution is not to be understood in a teleological manner. Rather, there is a direct causality going in a direction cause-effect, where cause is the experience of parent, and effect is, for instance, a prolongation of the neck of the offspring. And thus, the only motivation of evolution is the mere force of circumstances, this blind play of logical necessity. So Lamarck has a mechanistic explanation of evolution, and he does not really use the teleological one. Now we can move to Peirce and the so-called third type of evolution, or the evolution by habit or agapasm. But some authors also mention synechism instead of the term agapasm in the third type of evolution. And synechism can be also understood as evolutionary spirit or a natural tendency of cosmos towards a progressive and continuous growth directed to a given goal. This goal in the evolutionary understanding might be seen as a progressive perfection, a trying to become better than before. Therefore, Peirce's evolutionary theory is sometimes referred to as teleological, in reference both to synechism and agapasm. If I can mention some authors who talk about the teleology in Peirce, for instance, Burks or Breer. And in this understanding, teleological principle would be the third completing principle, thus completing chance and law with teleology. Well, we know that teleology is a very controversial, even repellent term in the scientific environment, although in biology somehow difficult to completely omit. It must be clearly stated that there are several conceptions of teleology. First, teleology is related to the notion of habit, of course. Habits do not emerge gratuitously, they are directed to definite ends, namely the search of nurture, for example, or a removal of the source of irritation. And in this manner, Peirce explains, for example, the habits of our nerve cells as the primary source of reflexes. So he explained reflexes as habits of nerve cells to remove sources of irritations. Thus, the reflexes become automatized, but initially they were habits acquired by nerve cells. Now, Jana's turn.
Hi everyone, greetings from Bohemian Forest. I will start now with Aristotle, because that is where probably teleology started. And, for Aristotle, every living being has a purpose of life. It has a goal to remain alive and to realize its form through ontogenesis. Ontogenesis was, like, for Aristotle, the goal-oriented process par excellence. So every organismal activity, its organs, its manifestations, everything is adjusted to this one goal, to the way of life of the organism. Yet, to see teleology in ontogeny and is not supposed to be understood as ontogeny having some sort of subjective motivations or intentions. This goal-oriented emergence of form, ontogeny, is naturally existing. It does not include intentionality. You can take the example of, for example, regular walks usually lead to good health, right? No matter the circumstances, no matter the subjective intentions, whether you want to go to the park with your dog or meet your mistress, or whether you walk in a forest or in a park. So walking is usually something that leads to health improvement, no matter the circumstances. And, as Denis Walsh puts it in his book on agency, purposes occurrences are robust across a range of different initial conditions and mechanisms. So, but eventually leading to the same goal. So that's what that was telos for Aristotle, without any subjective action. And I think possibly Lamarck has had a similar conception when he introduced the concept of power of life, which is like second main concept of Lamarck in organic evolution, next to the environment influencing organism's phenotype. And this power of life, of course, these two aspects are mutually connected. And this power of life was, even during Lamarck's life or after his death, interpreted as implying some kind of finality or some vitalistic or theological force. But as Ľudmila mentioned, Lamarck rejected teleology. For him, the power of life represented some kind of inherent power, physical necessity, due to which organisms' complexity cumulatively increases. He once wrote in one of his work that humans only tend to see some subjective goal or some finality in this concept. And teleology is also mentioned, of course, in contemporary biology, although, as Ľudmila said, it's quite a repellent term for many. Even Monod admitted that organisms are purposive by maintaining their viability and adapting to environmental circumstances, but he introduced this term teleonomy in order to avoid teleological explanation, meaning that natural selection actually tuned the organism in such way that organisms are purposive because natural selection and possibly other evolutionary phenomena. But there are other, on the other hand, there are other philosophers of biology who consider theological explanation to be completely acceptable in contemporary biology. And as, for example, Denis Walsh in his book Organisms, Agency and Evolution. And he emphasizes that this theological explanation should not be mixed with mechanical explanation. Although they are like sides of the same coin, mechanistic explanation give the answer to the questions how, however, theological explanation answer us to the question why. So I think basically whether you want to include teleology in your view, it's dependent on your own conception of evolution and concept of the organism. Whether you define evolution or organism as designed by natural selection to be seemingly purposive, or whether you consider organisms to be like goal-oriented as such, and therefore evolution is adaptive, and like in example of like organisms can plastically react to the environment, react to some affordances, make choices, be agents, etc. But back to Lamarck, what we wanted to emphasize with Ľudmila here is that actually Peirce is reading Lamarck right, unlike his contemporaries or unlike his followers or neo-Lamarckians. Lamarck did not interpret the organisms as some kind of seat of will, wishes, or consciousness in a human sense, as his readers often anticipated. This near vitalistic interpretation were rather symptomatic for neo-Lamarckians in America, for example, for Samuel Butler. And there is also this modern interpretation of Lamarckism, which is also very frustrating for me, that some people think that Lamarck actually believe that there are possible changes, like intentional changes of genetic information through will or some wishes. But for example, Ronald Fisher was mocking Lamarckism in this sense in one of his books, the statistician, I mean. And Lamarck emphasized, of course, Lamarck did not know genes. He mainly emphasized the role of environment in organismal behavior. And he did not know anything about genes. He did not used to think in terms of units of inheritance. For him, the forces which were relevant were physical, mechanical, and materialistic forces. And of course, the habitual evolution, which Peirce also considers to be a major part of his evolutionary view, can be found in Lamarckian philosophy. You know, the main law of use and disuse, which means that organisms' behavior, its habits, way of relating to its environmental circumstances actually are major constituents of organisms' phenotype. Lamarck would not use this word, of course, but that's how the organism looks like, how it behaves. And when the organisms encounters new environmental conditions, some organs, some habits can disappear because the organism does not have a longer use for these. So environment creating habits is this major cause of species change. And these changes, like changes in behavior, or muscle growth or organ losses, can be, of course, hereditary. But Lamarck never elaborated any deep conception of this habitual evolution. The habitual evolution was rather further developed by his followers within the concept of organic memory, which you may have heard of already from me before. It was an analogy between mental memory and inheritance, an analogy between acquisition of a trait and learning. And these neo-Lamarckians, in the whole Europe and in America, there were a lot of thinkers. It was kind of paradigm of a specific time. They used to attribute the capability of learning to all organic matter, and any experience enhanced by repetition could become habitual. Some of these interpretations were rather vitalistic, really, and some of them were quite mechanistic. But I will give the word back to Ľudmila.
Back to Peirce. I will just very shortly comment on his agapistic evolution because he uses the word agape, or love, from the Greek word agape. And I think that this concept deserves a short commentary. Peirce takes distance from both Darwin and Lamarck, but it seems that he has more sympathy with Lamarck. And in some places, he even compares with proper concept of agapistic evolution, or with the evolution by love. So the Greek word agape means love or loveliness, and surely it is difficult to understand whether the use of this term was meant is metaphorical, and if yes, in what sense, what is the metaphor? Well, Peirce sustains that the English translation of the word is not really appropriate because English lacks such a word. So I would say that he decided for this term mostly because of the lack in the terminology rather than with some metaphorical purpose. Simplified, agape is the habit to love the universe has tendency to take. But what does it really mean to say that the universe takes habits to love? For Peirce, the nature of the universe to take habits derives from the specific understanding of love as an overwhelming principle in the cosmos, where there are no contradictions to love. Hateful is only lack of love or a tendency towards love. And agapism has many forms, from physical attractions manifesting in form of physical laws, such as gravity, to various modes of affections in human culture. Agapism of physical forms, such as the gravity, might be qualified as genuine anankasm or degenerate agapism. Because of its lawfulness, this lawfulness is typical for anankasm rather than for agapism. Thus, the boundary between anankasm and agapism is not represented by a straight line. I can just show you the short quote from this essay, Evolutionary Law, where Peirce comments on Lamarck. And he says, evolution by sport and an evolution by mechanical necessity are conceptions warring against one another. Lamarckian evolution is thus evolution by the force of habit. Thus, habit plays a double part. It serves to establish the new features and also to bring them into harmony with the general morphology and function of the animals and plants to which they belong. Lamarckian evolution coincides with general description of reaction of love, to which I suppose he yielded his assent. So Peirce found the essence of habit or love in writings of Lamarck, even if Lamarck himself didn't really develop deeper in this direction. And I can mention here that also Gregory Peircean commented on Lamarck in his lecture Form, Substance, and Difference. And he also kind of found there are some features that Lamarck himself probably didn't develop, such as mind, habit, and evolution, connection between mind and habit. But for Lamarck, habit is strictly related to mechanistical explanation. And I can show you this quote from Lamarck, where he explains with the very famous example of the prolongation of the giraffe's neck, thanks to the notion of habit, how this all happens. So he uses the words such as necessity and habit, very related one to another. Now let me extend further on the relation between habit and law, or agapism and anankasm. I already mentioned this relation. So in the overall Peirce work, there is no notion which would escape the triadic explanation. Evolution is not an exception. An understanding of evolutionary habit is only possible in the triadic perspective. When I say triadic, I mean that triad is the basic relation in Peirce relational logic, and it is irreducible to dyads or monads. The essence and uniqueness of Peirce's identity relation resides in its ontological threefold status. So when applied to evolutionary theory, it results in habit preceding law, or secondness as dyad precedes the the triad or the habit. And the last comments by Jana.
I will make it short. I just, you know that I'm always in love with epigenetics. So I was thinking epigenetics could be a good example also of evolution by habit. And thank you, Ľudmila, for your advertisement of our book. You can read multiple examples. We actually think the whole evolution is epigenetic with Anton. And I wanted to mention quite old papers that, for example, some authors like Ginsburg and Jablonka mentioned that speak about cellular learning through epigenetic meaning that some modification like DNA methylation can facilitate the reaction to external stimuli, which the cellular generation already experienced before. Also, there was also I published a hypothesis in Science about concept of instinct, which could be quite in concordance with Lamarckian view. Ľudmila, please, the next slide. And meaning that behavior first must be learned, and through the repetition in subsequent generation only becomes automatic and instinctive. And there are also very nice studies lately about short non-coding RNAs, where there is actual huge transfer of these RNAs from somatic to germinal line through exosomes during the sperm maturation, which can transfer a lot of experiences of the previous generation. So Ľudmila will quickly conclude.
Okay, so to quickly conclude, what we try to tell you today is the relevance of both Lamarck and Peirce for the contemporary biology. The notion of interpretant or interpretation has been already used in epigenetics because there is no final interpretant, and the interpretation can start again and again when the external conditions allow for it. But we also think that notions such as agapistic evolution are suitable as well for the contemporary epigenetics, and habitual evolution by Lamarck, but also by Peirce, it can be reconsidered in this optic. So, and the last comment is that Lamarck and Peirce do have more in common than we would expect. They both rely on the notion of habit in their evolutionary theories, with the difference that Peirce interprets it with more teleological perspective, while Lamarck not at all. And with this, I conclude, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry for...
Since some part of the time saved from the previous is used up, we have just time for 6 minutes for questions. So can I see hands, please? Philip?
That was really nice presentation. And I would like to ask you, so because mention of habit in Lamarck and Peirce, now I'm a bit puzzled if like, so it's about, the word is same, of course, but in Peirce's eyes, he also like concluded that Lamarck, it's about laws, and this habit connected to use and disuse, it seems very mechanical, but Peirce's use of habit is something different, like you made this connection to agape. So what is the continuity in the use of this habit in these authors? It seems to me now that it's a bit different, but maybe I was just puzzled by something.
If I may say, I think it's different in terms of teleology, that actually where Peirce uses habit Lamarck would not agree with the habitual evolution in terms of teleology, but he uses habit in this rather mechanical sense in terms of organisms reacting to the environment and creating habits, but it does not have this teleological dimension, I think, but the term is similar.
Peter?
Yes, very interesting. I'm going to Bateson, going to
Peter, your voice is interrupted.
Bateson was. Can you?
We cannot hear you.
Oh.
Well, your mic is on, but there is some interruption.
Okay. Interruption in the mic.
Okay, can you repeat your question?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
Can you continue? Habit is the question, and Bateson, in his essay on alcoholism, showed that habit can also be dangerous as well as being an ongoing way of doing things. And he suggested that the change for habit or good habit or evolution would be altering of relationships. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous does to cure those people who drink too much, change the nature of relations. So I don't think Peirce does that.
Well,
Sorry,
I don't think, if this was a question or comment, but I don't think that Peirce attributes such qualities as positive or negative to the notion of habit. I'm not sure about this. Like, of course, it can be negative. I totally agree with you.
But if I may comment on this alcoholism thing, actually within this paradigm of the organic memory, it was reflected in all kinds of scientific branches, and also in criminology, and this habitual evolution, like some sorts of features, human features, cumulatively increasing in the human population, was something what explained decaying of the civilization, like in terms of alcoholism or criminal behavior and stuff like this. So it can be connected to habitual evolution very well as a negative example. Yeah, it was an explanation of degradation, actually.
May I give the last question to Jamin, and I would kindly ask Andre to, well, how do we do it? Is there a breakout room, or can questions be asked during the...
There is a breakout room.
Beg your pardon? Breakout room?
There is a breakout room.
Okay, so I would kindly ask Andre to ask questions, his questions in the breakout room. So Jamin, please.
Okay, thank you so much for this paper. I think that this is a topic that really deserves extensive discussion. I want to suggest a chapter that I published in Biosemiotic Perspectives in Language and Linguistics, and in the biosemiotic series, Velmazova, Cole, and Cowley, deep congruence between linguistic and biotic growth, where I'm trying to develop some of the same questions, which I think they really deserve a lot of extended discussion. One quick question for you in this context, perhaps too big to follow up on, but just in general, possible homology or maybe even isomorphism between teuchasm and ecology, ononchasm and phylogeny, and agapasm and ontogeny. And I know your paper was mainly about the ontogenetic, or agapastic side of this equation. But so I would especially ask about that possibility between what we tend to discuss as ontogeny, not just at the level of individual growth, though, also at the level of the growth of what Peirce would call concrete reasonableness within the population, as being a major factor in driving evolution that's accepted in biology, but not mapped on to Peirce's agapasm in much detail. So what do you think about that connection?
Thank you very much for your suggestion. I will definitely read that chapter by you. About your suggestion to apply this triad of anancasm, ticasm, anancasm, and agapasm to ecology, was like that, phylogeny and ontogeny. This is very interesting. We, to be honest, we didn't discuss it with Jana because this is really beyond our scope for this presentation. But I think that I can see your point, and I think that we can develop on that maybe in the future. That is really an interesting suggestion. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks.